Greetings. In this video we're going to talk about CSS fonts. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so in some of our previous lessons here we've started talking a little bit about CSS and how we use this to style and format our web pages. In other words, instead of just having regular old text that has no color or life to it, we add that using CSS. And a big part of that is messing around with fonts and font families. So let's go ahead and get started on learning how to do that. Alright, now on your W3 Schools tutorial there's a really cool graphic that shows you the differences between serifs and sans serif fonts. And in general, the good rule of thumb here when you're messing around with fonts and styling them is you want them to be easy to read. Now, one of the things about sans serif fonts, when you're looking at computer screens, both like on a computer and then also on, say, an iPad or an iPod or portable devices, basically, the sans serif fonts are usually considered easier to read. So those are the kind of font families you'll want to kind of stay with in general. Something like Arial, Verdana, sans serif, things like that. If you look at Apple's web page, for example, you'll see that most of the fonts that they use on Apple's website in general are serif and sans serif type fonts. Okay? Most of the text you'll see something like a sans serif type font combined with underneath more of a serif type font, okay, just to kind of break them up. And that's a little bit out of the scope of this course as far as web design and making things look super pretty and all that, but that is something that you can do to kind of make your text stand out, and that is to make your text smaller, make it bigger, give it a different color, use a different font family, that kind of thing. Alright, so here is how we set up our font families. And there are so many different font families and font styles. I'm just going to cover some of the basic ones that are very popular. So let's say I type in a paragraph, okay, and I'm just going to say this is a paragraph with no styling. Okay, so if I run my page here, you'll see that, oops, save that file, now run, sweet. Okay, if I have no styling at all, no style rules applied to this paragraph, you'll see that it's the text is the color that's the browser default, the size that's the browser default for a paragraph, and the font that is the default for the browser. And in Chrome, if you want to see what your settings are, you can click on the little wrench up at the upper right hand corner and then go to settings, and it's in your appearances. Let's click advanced settings here. It's a little different with each browser. Alright, where it says web contents, when you have font size by default is medium. If I click customize font, my standard font is Times New Roman. My serif font also is Times New Roman. My sans serif font by default is Arial. And then if I have a fixed width font, that would be Courier, or in this case Courier New. If you don't specify anything in CSS for the type of font or type of font styling, it's just going to look like this, Times New Roman 16-point font. Now let's go ahead and take a different paragraph, and I'm going to say P, and then I'm going to give it an ID of bold text. I'm going to say this is a paragraph with bold text. And then in my style sheet that I have linked, I'm just going to do a new ID called bold text. I believe that's what I called it. Let's double check, and it is. Okay, bold text, and I'm just going to say that font weight is bold. Okay. Now, let's go render our page again, and you'll see that I have another excuse me, paragraph, but this one has bold text. And the rule is font weight, and the value is bold. Okay. Now, here's something. I'm going to set up another ID, and I'm going to call it let's go with Arial. Okay, Arial text. And I'm going to say font family, okay, is Arial, comma, Verdana. And what this means is that anything that matches this ID has font family of Arial or Verdana, which means that the browser will try at first to use the Arial font, and if the Arial font is not available, then to use Verdana. And if Verdana isn't available, then it will use whatever the browser default font is. Okay. But both Macs and PCs use Arial and Verdana. They both have them installed. So I'm going to go back to my CSS fonts page, and I'm going to just do a new paragraph, and this one has an ID of Arial text, and I'm just going to say this paragraph uses Arial text. Okay, save the page, render it, and then you'll see that indeed this paragraph is using Arial text, and the one at the very top has no styling. Do you see the difference? Again, that's Times New Roman, size medium, size 16-point font. The one on the bottom uses Arial text, again medium font. Okay. Now, one of the things about font family, and I guess I need to kind of explain what they are in a little more detail, but a font family is just a set of fonts that you can use as far as like that match a certain look that you're going for. Like for example, if I want something that's sans serif, maybe I'll use Arial Verdana or sans. And if I use that in a font family, again, those are very similar fonts. So if I'm going for a specific look, that's what I'm going to put in. Now, one of the things that you'll want to make sure that if you use a font, any kind of font family or just a specific font, and it has and the font is more than one word, you need to make sure to put those words in quotes. So for example, let's say for every H2 size heading, I want to use the font family of Times New Roman and Times, and then finally serif. Okay. You'll see that because Times New Roman, the font is more than one word, I had to put those within quotes. You need to make sure that you have that, otherwise that rule will not work. Now, the next thing that you're going to see is this. It's called font style. So font-style property. Okay? And that's usually almost exclusively used for italic text. It's not really used for much else. You can use it for oblique text as well, but most people, 99.999% of the time, it's just going to be for italic text. So I'm going to create a class called italic text, or italics or italicized, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it, actually, you know what, I'm just going to call it italic. Okay? And all this does is you have a rule called font style, and then it's just italic. Okay? And that's it. So anything that I have a class with that uses italic, it's going to have italic fonts. Okay? So I'm going to put in a new paragraph, and I'm just going to say, I love work because it is so, and then I'm going to say class. I'm going to do a span, class, italic, and then I'm going to type in much fun, okay, and then close out my span, close out my paragraph. I'll talk to you in a second about what a span is. Alright, so now if I run my page again here, you should see that, let me throw in an exclamation point there. If I run my page, you should see that it says, I love work because it is so much fun. And the much fun and that exclamation point at the end are in italics. Okay. Now, what a span is if you have to do some inline text, for example, where you need to span across one or more words or characters or whatever, then you put in what's called the span tag, and then you say what the class or the ID is, okay, and then close out the opening span tag. So this will start wherever you're applying these CSS rules here. Okay, then you type in whatever your content is, and then when you're done and you want to end this span, you want to end the italic text in this case, then you just do a closing span tag. Okay, and that's what this looks like. Now, one of the things that I could do in this italic text, and I can even use another class called red text. Okay, and with red text, all I have is the color of my text is red. So what I have here in this font is I have a span that goes across. It's using two different classes. It's using italic and red text, so that the text will be in italics and it will be red. Okay, let's go ahead and render this. Do. I need to do two spans here. And usually you'll just put all this in one rule, but anyways, I did it in two different classes, two different rules. So again, two spans, and then the text in the middle, and then close out the second span, and then close out the first span. Okay, and again, it's just making the text italic and red. All right. Now, one of the things that we can do is we can set some font sizes. So let's say I want a large font, or maybe I want a small font. A good example of this, going back to this Apple web page, you'll see that we have, and actually I'll go ahead and create something kind of similar to this text right here with these three lines. What you're seeing is some smaller text, some larger text, and then smaller text again. And then there's a different font in the middle, and it looks like the same or similar fonts for the first and third lines here. So here's what we can do. I'm going to go back to my code, and I'm going to put in just an H3 size heading that says sample Apple ad. Okay, and then I'm going to have a paragraph, and it's going to say on the first line introducing, and then the second line MacBook Pro, and then the third one I believe it said with Retina display. Yeah, and that's a lowercase w. Okay, so here's what we look like at first. So the sample Apple ad, it says introducing MacBook Pro with Retina display. And I need to do a couple of different things here. I need to center the text for the first and third lines. So I'm going to give it an ID of centered text. Actually, I'm going to give it an ID of add line 1 because this is unique. And then in the second line, I'm going to give it the ID of add line 2. And then on the third line, I'm going to give it an ID of add line 3. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We need to figure out on this first line of text in the Apple code. It looks like some sort of gray. It's probably about 30 pixels, maybe 24 pixels, 30 pixels, I don't know, something like that. And it's definitely a serif type font. I don't know exactly which one it is, and actually it appears to be an image, so I can't really even find out what that is easily. Alright, so let's do this. Let's go into our external style sheet. I'm going to put in a comment first, and I'm going to say sample Apple ad rules. And the first one is an ID of add line 1. And then I have add line 2 and add line 3, so I'm going to put in those rules. Okay, as well. You notice I'm doing a lot of copying and pasting because that shaves a lot of time off my coding. Okay, so add line 1. We have a text align, and I covered that in a previous video, but we have a text align of center. And we have the same thing in add line 3. Okay, so let's go and look at our ad here. And actually all three of them have a text align of center. Alright, so on the first one here, let's do another thing here called font size. And font size just says how many pixels, basically mostly pixels, EM, or you also have the ability to say medium, large, extra large, yada 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 in your font size as well. But I'm going to say that I want it to be about 30 pixels or so. Okay, and then I'm going to say that I want my font family to be, let's check Verdana. That doesn't sound right, but let's look. Actually, that's pretty close. And it's probably about 25 pixels. Again, I'm just going to I'm going to get this close, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And in advanced CSS, I can actually really hone this in and make it look just like their font here, except for this one in the middle, because that's an Apple proprietary font, but it's It's pretty close. Alright, so on add line 2, we're probably, that font family is probably something like times, actually it's more of a serif, it's probably like an Arial, something similar. And then the font size in that one's probably about 45 pixels, roughly, just kind of looking at it here. Let's go 50 pixels. Yeah, it's this thing called Adobe Myriad, but or an Apple Myriad, but it's not something that all browsers are going to have. Okay. Anyways, I'll get close to it. I'm just overanalyzing it here, which makes for a long, boring video. Okay. So, anyways, let's go ahead and you know what? I'm just going to use Verdana again and change the font size. I'm also going to set the font weight to be bold. Alright. I'm going to set the font size to 60 pixels. Okay, getting a little closer here. And the color on that one, well, it's kind of has a gradient to it, but it's not quite black, but it's pretty close. And then finally on the add line 3, pretty much have the same rules as add line 1. The only thing we're going to change is the font color. Yeah, that'll work for now. Okay, again, later on in the course we can revisit this and make it spot on, almost perfect. But this will at least give us some looks here. Alright, so we set our font size with pixels at 25 pixels for the first line, 60 for the second, and 25 for the third. You can do what's called EM as well. Now, the thing is with EM is that's primarily used in Internet Explorer and a lot of older versions of Internet Explorer like 5, 6, and 7, a little bit in 8, but for the most part when you're developing you're going to just use pixels. So I'm not going to actually cover that, but something that is in the tutorial if you want to read it. Alright, now let's go ahead and pick some colors real quick. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because there's so many colors to choose from. Let's just go out to W3 Schools and look at their HTML colors real quick. Now, the top line's probably something close to the CH. It's kind of a light gray. So I'm going to steal this color code. And I'm just going to say that this is my color. Okay. It's a little darker than that. Alright, let's go a couple more up. And then we'll call it good. Grab a slightly darker color. Paste it. the hex value. Yeah, that's a little better, I guess. And then the top one's not totally black, it's more of like a dark gray, or I'm sorry, the middle one. So I'm going to go up and grab a pretty heavy gray shade, but not totally black. And then do the color there. Okay. Yeah, that's not bad, I guess. And then the bottom one is pretty close to the same color, maybe a shade or two lighter. It's hard to tell. Let's go back here and just grab just a shade or two lighter. Okay, now run our page. And again, it's not perfect. It's, you know, a 10-minute. Hey, let's make it look like the MacBook Pro page. Okay. That's pretty close. There are a lot of things we can do to kind of squish all that together to make it the fonts really pop. All right. Now, one of the things you're going to want to look at is go into the tutorial for CSS fonts and W3 Schools and click on all the different CSS font properties. There are a bunch of them. I just showed you the basic ones, the ones that are most commonly used. And you really want to get a feel for some of the things you can do with messing around with fonts. The other thing you want to do is look up on the internet, and you want to do this, like compatible browser fonts. Or common fonts to all versions of Windows and Macs. Because when you're developing, you should develop to, so if that's, you know, somebody has a Windows computer, a Mac computer, they'll still be able to see. Okay. So, and then this site's actually great. This AmpSoft site, I've referred people to this one actually quite frequently, especially in upper, you know, more difficult web development courses, because it shows you what the different samples, what the fonts actually look like. So when you're designing, you can say, well, I want a font that kind of looks like Tahoma, and then the font underneath it, I want that to look more like, you know, Lucida Console or whatever. So, you know, you can kind of look at to see what the common fonts are, and that should work for you. All right, well, that pretty much wraps it up for this video, and the next video in this series for this week is formatting links, and I'll show you how to do that. As always, if you have any questions, just shoot me an email and I'll get right back to you. Thanks.